Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Faith Brynels Insights, the podcast. Okay, so hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Faith Brynels Insights podcast. I'm Faith Brynel, and I hope you've had a wonderful and productive week so far. Happy Thursday. This is our usual podcasting day. As you'll notice, there's no video as I'm getting over a cold, but God is good. So here I am, and if I sound a little bit snivelly, that's literally why, because I'm getting over a cold. But let's get stuck into today's episode and talk about the Eisenhower Matrix. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but if you are aware of it, it's going to be a quick refresher. And if you're not aware of it, it's going to be a quick overview of the Eisenhower Matrix. So the Eisenhower Matrix is actually something that I actively use in my work life, in my study life. So let's get stuck in. So this is a really powerful topic, because if you're looking to supercharge your productivity, supercharge your time management, and make more informed decisions, you're literally in the right place. So let's get straight into it. So let's try to set the context about the Eisenhower Matrix. So the Eisenhower Matrix is also known as either the priority matrix, or some people call it the urgent important matrix. It's a really, really important tool for time management and decision making. Now, actually, let's set that a little bit of context in terms of the inception of the Eisenhower Matrix and the kind of context behind the creation and the name Eisenhower Matrix. It was actually named after Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States, and he was also a general during World War II. So the matrix really helps us to really categorize tasks based on their urgency and importance, which actually provide the person using it, or the person who's actively exercising it, we got there in the end, to provide a clear roadmap for prioritization. So I'll actually segment here and do a little bit of advertising. We do actually sell at FBI, Faith Brynels Insights, we do actually sell a priority matrix themed book, which basically helps to kind of break down those kind of tasks as well into what's most important. So that is something to feel free to have a look at, and I'll put the link in bio. So let's talking more about the Eisenhower Matrix. It really is, it's based into 4 quadrants. So if you Google the Eisenhower Matrix, you'll see that it's broken into 4 quadrants. So quadrant 1 consists of tasks that are both urgent and important. Now, these require immediate attention. So quadrant 2 is important, but it's not for those urgent tasks. So it's looking at strategic planning. It helps you to plan strategically and really usher in that personal development. Now, let me break it down even further. Quadrant 1, let me speak from my personal perspective as a current master's student. Quadrant 1 is going to be, I'm currently reading law at BP University. So they actually have this framework, which is the prepare, the apply stage, the consolidate, and the collaborate stage. And what that actually speaks to is helping you to really break down what you have to do and prepare for each week. So I have classes, and so in my prepare stage, that is my quadrant 1. That prepare and that apply stage is that quadrant 1, because I'm preparing for common law, preparing for contract law, for public law, and then I'm also having to apply those skills that I've just literally kind of read about, and trying to acquire them and really put them and implement them in my everyday life and check my knowledge, and if that knowledge is stuck to my brain, if I'm able to recall if I'm able to recall that information or remember it. So that's quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is important but not urgent. So let me think, what is important but not urgent? I'd say yes, preparing for my formative. That is very important, but it's not urgent because my formative isn't until a few months from now. So I will still stick to preparing for those weekly collaborate sessions, which is also called a workshop. And then quadrant 3 is looking at those urgent but not important tasks. So they can be delegated if possible. So for example, quadrant 3, let's say as some of you may be aware, I also run events. So quadrant 3 is looking at those events and say, let's say I can bring in an intern or a staff member to actually organize those events. I can put that in quadrant 3. Okay. So looking at quadrant 3, I could say to myself, okay, well, I have an event, which we actually do on March 12th, called Legally Empowered. I need to do that event. It's important to me, but how can I delegate that task to somebody else? How can I create a team to manage that event? Or how can I do that in the evenings after my study sessions? Or how can I do that in my downtime while I'm watching a TV program? How can I just kind of go through those key informations as well? And then finally, last but definitely not least, is quadrant 4, tasks that are not urgent or important. So there are things that you might add to your day that really are just not urgent. They're not important, they're not urgent. So things like that. And those are the ones that we try and eliminate. So, for example, watering my grass in winter, for me, is neither urgent nor important. I mean, at one point back in summer, I was talking to my granddad, and I did actually want to start my own garden. I did want to plant some seeds, I did want to plant some flowers, but right now, in where I am right now, that is not urgent or important for me, because I have to focus on my masters. I'm focusing on running my business. But maybe later on down the line, and also in terms of watering my plant, I actually do have a plant. I do actually have a bush, and I'm obviously not going to water it now because we are literally in winter, and yesterday it was pouring it down in rain, so I wouldn't be going outside catching another cold to water my bush, to water the bush that I have implanted in my garden. So that's something as well. Because I literally, context of this bush is that it was bought for me by someone when I was young, so that the plant is actually the same age as me. So when I turned 21 last year, it turned 21. When I turned 22 this year, it will turn 22. So that's something cool. But that's something that I can minimize or eliminate. Moving on now to let's talk about that real life application, because that is something that is really important. Looking at the real life application of something and really understanding that. Okay, so back into part 2 now. Let's talk about how we can apply the Eisenhower Matrix to our daily lives. Let's just take a moment to reflect on all of our tasks. So for all of my listeners, take a moment now to reflect on all of the tasks that you have to do and really start to assign them to the relevant quadrant. And really by doing this, you're going to gain a visual representation of where your time and energy is typically spent. Now, if you're, currently in the midst of burnout and you're struggling, you're physically and emotionally exhausted, this is definitely the right study method. This is definitely the right method to actually apply to your life, apply to your tasks at the moment, because it will help you to then conceptualize where your energy is going and start to understand why you feel so tired, why you feel so tired and exhausted, but whether it be physical or emotional. And really, this is a game changer for maximizing productivity. Now, let me talk about my personal experience. As I did say from the outset of this podcast episode, I'm actually a master's student now. I graduated reading politics from King's, so I'm now actually reading law at BPP. And I will talk about a bit more about my personal journey in just a second. I know a lot of people who I talk to are always really, it piques their interest, and they're asking me about my journey to the bar from a non-law background. So that's something I will definitely talk about very soon. So yeah, the Eisenhower Matrix for myself, as somebody who has to manage both the academic side and the kind of career and entrepreneurial side, looking at running my own business, which is what I do as well in my spare time, it really has helped me to actually understand what I actually need to do and what I want to do. Okay, guys, I'm back. I literally just started sneezing. That is one of the perks of trying to record a podcast episode while you're unwell. But anyway, I'm sticking to the cause. So yeah, I recently implemented the Eisenhower Matrix in my own routine. As I said before, my sneezing break, I literally have really found great kind of impact from it as well. Because when looking at in terms of running my own business and looking at my events, looking at my podcasting as well, interviewing guest speakers, looking at preparing and kind of producing my own resources, my own merchandise, working with universities and other organizations, it helps me to actually understand what I need to do then, what I don't need to do until next week, what I can delegate, and in the kind of creation of my team now, I can start to think about what roles and what kind of people I'm looking for to fill my team. And so that really helped me as well. And what I actually do use as well is my resources. I've actually got a Cornell style notebook, which is for another day. We'll talk about that another time. Mind mapping, I actually use a to-do list notebook every day, which follows the structure of the Eisenhower Matrix. So every day I wake up, and I'm actually flicking through it now, which is why you can hear it in the background. And I've just literally moved closer to the mic. That's why the sudden shift in audio volume. So in my daily to-do, I've got the top 3 things. If I have time, I must complete, don't forget, calls, emails, and texts, and not to do, and the notes. And trust me, there are a lot of calls, emails, and texts I have to do on a daily basis. So that really comes in handy. There's always top 3 things I have to do. So for this week, I literally had looking at my graduate. Well, that was my last week. Hang on, let me get this week. So I had so my top 3 things were looking at kind of obviously spending time with God, obviously looking at my Prince's Trust, I'm working with the Prince's Trust now, and looking at kind of studying and podcasting and things like that. So that's obviously top 4. But God, spending time with God is always my top 3. So it's always something that's in my mind. But in terms of my top 3, in terms of my academics, it was to study. Obviously, I have to, because planning prevents poor performance. It was looking at the Prince's Trust and trying to push my business to the launch group, and then podcasting. So that was literally what we're doing. Okay, so that's basically a literal example of what I do. And so I actually use this notebook avidly to plan out my day. I use Notion as well, which I find really helpful in terms of noting down my lecture notes. I use Notion, I use this notebook here, and other resources as well, which I find. I also love the Pomodoro method, which is something I touched on last year, which I definitely will touch on again this year. The Pomodoro method is really one of my favorite methods for time management. I really enjoy the Core Now method as well, which looks at in-depth kind of focus and study. And I love using like post-it notes and other things like that, mind maps, flashcards, whether they be physical like paper flashcards or digital, looking at Quizlet. I know that my sister loves Anki or Anki, however you pronounce it. And those are the kind of things as well that I use. So really now, tips implementation. If you're ready, now if this brief episode has convinced you to use the Eisenhower Matrix, which I hope it has, then here are 3 steps that you can really use now. Step 1 is to regularly update and reassess your tasks within the matrix and within the 4 quadrants. Now let's just refresh the 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 consists of tasks that are both urgent and important. Quadrant 2 is important but not urgent. Quadrant 3 is urgent but not important. And quadrant 4 is tasks that are neither urgent nor important. Okay. And then so step 2 would be, don't be afraid to delegate tasks when possible. Don't be afraid to ask someone for help. Don't be afraid to, try and delegate. As I said, if you have a team or if you have other people who can help you, don't be afraid to delegate. Because for myself, I will have to delegate very soon. As I said, I'm looking to create my team now for my business. I'm delegating people, so one person to do the editing, for example, one person to do the social media preparation, for example. So looking at those different kind of aspects and looking at those different kind of team members who can really help you perform those tasks, and not actually perform those tasks with you kind of being sacrificed in your mental health and your well-being as well. And third, but definitely not least, using technology to your advantage. So there are plenty of apps designed around the Eisenhower Matrix concept. You can feel free to purchase one of these books, which are on Amazon. You can feel free to use resources online. There's loads there. I use Notion. I mentioned my notebook. I use mind maps. I use Quizlet. There's so many resources. Obviously, these aren't some of these aren't specifically Eisenhower Matrix, but this notebook is specific Eisenhower Matrix. I know that there are apps as well out there that are specifically designed around this concept. So as we wrap up today's episode, I really encourage all of you to give the Eisenhower Matrix a go. You never know unless you try. It's like trying a new food. You never know if it's nice unless you try it. And so trust me, I've discovered a lot of new foods that I never thought I ate, that I actually would eat recently. And it's actually been quite nice. So this is the same for this method of study, for this method of productivity, for this life applicable method. Remember, it's not just about being busy, it's about being productive with a purpose. And I'd say, remember, it's also not an event, it's a journey. So you might not grasp it by today or tomorrow or next week, but every day you strive to be more productive, it actually will help you in the end. So thank you to all of my listeners for joining me again on the Faith Brynels Insights podcast. How to stay in touch is to follow me at Faith B Insights on Instagram and all the major podcast platforms, on all the social platforms, or at Faith Brynel. Brynel is spelled Brynel. You can also connect with me on Etsy. You can follow my shop on Etsy or on Amazon. You can also feel free to attend our events, all free events on March 12th, in May, I think it's May 10th and September 10th as well. Those are the 3 more events for this year, and there should be a couple of others. And then finally, remember to stay inspired and keep shining. And then finally as well, if you're already on YouTube, if you're streaming this video, this kind of podcast audio, however you want to term it, through YouTube, then you can also stay tuned for my new playlist, which is coming out. My new playlist, which actually started off with my graduation video that I posted last week. So the playlist is called A King's College London Graduate's Diary, Undergraduate Diaries as a 2-1 Politics Graduate. So in this playlist, I'm going to give you study tips for success, navigating King's, navigating those campuses, my undergraduate diaries, and really networking and career insights as well, and any recommended resources as a politics graduate, and looking at how I was able, with the grace of God, to get a 2-1. It's only by the grace of God I actually made it. So thank you everybody for tuning back in. Remember, it's not an event, it's a journey. Your journey can begin now, but you just have to make those steps, to implement those steps for change. So thank you everybody, and I pray and hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye everybody.